Okay, guys, so the Yamaha R9 was recently unveiled, and already it's catching all kinds of criticism from motorcycle enthusiasts. And the basis of their critique is this: if you have a motorcycle that looks like the Yamaha R9 with that awesome bodywork, the full fairing, the clip-on handlebars, it comes equipped with a suite of electronic aids that is rivaled by no one. It's lifted right off of the R1. It comes with hyper sports style tires. You get the idea. This is a hyper sports motorcycle, and folks were expecting this, or at least had hoped that it would be the next coming of the 900cc super sport level of bikes. But the problem is just that. It is only a super sport. This is not a hyper sport like the motorcycle that it replaced, which is the R6. And that is made no more clear than the engine choice that they use, the CP3. It's a 900cc triple, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with this motorcycle's engine other than the fact that it's sold on the idea that it is a torquey, very street-friendly engine, reliable. Well, these are not traits that a hyperclass motorcycle buyer is looking for. And so it's left to question really what is the target audience for this bike. And at $12,500, well, it's got some pretty stiff competition, at least in terms of motorcycles that look like an R9. You've got the GSX-R 750, which is always the boss of the middleweight class. You got to admit that. But if you take the GSX-R 750 out of the equation, which is actually pretty hard to do because they're basically the same price, they look the same, and well, the GSX-R 750 does have about 30 odd more horsepower than the R9 and the same torque. So here starts to fall apart that whole torquey delivery of power argument. See, there's only about 4 foot-pounds of torque that separate the GSX-R 750 from the R9. That's really not a lot to really split hairs over. I just mentioned that 30-odd horsepower, though, and that will definitely divide some folks. But then the proponents of the R9 would say, well, it's not meant to compete with the GSX-R 750. This is more a motorcycle that is for the street, a sport bike for the street. Okay, if you say so, but GSX-R 750s have been ripping it up on the street for quite a long time. As a matter of fact, if it weren't for the GSX-R 750, the sport bike as we know it today may not have ever been, well, what it is today. So then that got me to thinking a little bit more. And this also goes back to the whole A2 compliant type of sport bike. And I'm going to say sport bike, not hyper sports, or really even super sport, even though that is a major misnomer. Sport bikes like the Daytona 660, the CBR 650, the Tuono 660, you've got the R7 and the GSX 8R. All of these motorcycles are just sport bikes. They're not meant to be fast, they're meant to be sporting. And the people that will buy them, as general statements would go, are going to enjoy those motorcycles in a more responsible manner than those of us that are more into hyper sports class bikes. You see, it kind of ends up looking like this. Sport bike riders enjoy a motorcycle. They want to have the thing on the side of the tire. They want to feel safe. They want to go out, have fun, enjoy the wind in their hair in a sporting way at a somewhat spirited pace. For those riders, a motorcycle like the R9 or the soon-to-be RCR, or like in the thumbnail of this video, the Buell Thunderbolt, could be right up your alley, because nothing spells torque down low like a V-twin from Harley-Davidson wedged into a sport bike chassis, right? Haven't we done this torquey sport bike thing already? Anyway, I think you get the drift. These really are not track weapons. I mean, you can put them on the track, but you can put any motorcycle on the track for that matter. These are just motorcycles that will usher you down the street in a sporting way through your favorite back roads in a nice, comfortable manner. On the other hand, hypersports motorcycle riders, We're a little bit different. We know what we're going out to do. I mean, we are the Giga Chad blasting past decent people on their sport bike with our hyper sport bikes, usually on the side of the tire and usually dragging body parts if we can get away with it. That is the main difference. There is a completely different crowd, and that completely different crowd has a completely different skill set. A sport bike rider may have come from a cruiser or may have come from one of the smaller sport bikes. They may have come from a standard and they're looking for a sportier motorcycling experience that's not going to be overwhelming to the senses. Hyperclass riders, those that would choose the GSX-R 750 or a R6 if it was still made, the GSX-R 600, or leader class, perish the thought, motorcycles. These are motorcyclists that are going to be taking risks, and unnecessary risk if I'm being completely honest. But that is the reality. The skill set is completely different. Hyper sports class riders are typically track at least trained, or if not track trained, they've at least been track experienced. That's really where the difference lies. Hypersports class motorcycle buyers will have very little interest in a motorcycle that is only street oriented. They're looking for something significantly more powerful, something that is going to make power at the top of the rev range. Horsepower wins that argument every time. And that's another issue. When folks are talking about the R9, they will always shirk the topic of horsepower, and they'll talk about that torquey and responsive CP3 engine. Yeah, well, let me ask you this. If that's the case, does horsepower even matter? Is it just because it's torquey? Do you even care about the specifications if you're buying one of those sport bikes in the 900cc class? Just curious, because, well, horsepower does matter to most. It's part of the specifications. So let me know what your thoughts are. I'd love to hear if you've been waffling a little bit on this R9 or the class of bikes that it represents. With that, we'll catch you on the next one.